All right, today we're going to discuss whether or not orally introduced glycine can induce a growth hormone increase, especially at bedtime, and why there's almost no chance of that happening with many of the amino acids that are touted as growth hormone releasing aminos. Let's get into it. This is the original study from 1978 that people often reference, but there's one issue with it. The people that got the best results in this study were people that had a partial gastrectomy. So they introduced basically the glycine straight into their small intestine. So there was no breaking down of the glycine by the stomach acids. So in order to get better results in normal subjects, they introduced it intraduodenally. So we may not be able to do that. I don't know if you're going to try to get past your stomach or not, but I don't recommend it. So keep in mind that these results of this particular study are not normal subjects, or they were normal subjects that had a special introduction. It bypassed the stomach. That's often missed, okay? Now, here's this other study that talks about 4, 8, or 12 grams of glycine intravenously infused over 15 to 20 minutes in normal subjects. And this is what's intriguing to me. Although I'm not going to use an intravenous introduction of that. I feel like that would be quite intrusive. I just want to look at the fact that what was getting through in this case was extremely dose dependent. It's very proportional. 4 grams, this is a chart, 8 grams, and 12 grams. The 12 grams had the biggest effect by far, but it's very proportional. This is right at 4 nanograms per milliliter. So nanograms per milliliter, this is right about 4 nanograms per milliliter, right under 8, it's probably more like 7, and here's at 12. But statistically, that's pretty much 4, 8, and 12. Now, my theory would be if you can make sure that the pH of the mixture is correct so that the glycine is not being metabolized automatically incorrectly, because if the pH is too high, it'll metabolize as one thing. If it's too low, it'll metabolize as another. If it stays in that middle ground, it's more likely to be used as intended. What are these results like? What is it comparable to? Okay, so they had essentially 20 grams of glycine in 1 cup of water. Pretty simple, okay? It says it right here, 0.3 m, that's 0.3 of its molecular weight per liter. So adjusted, that's basically 18 to 20 grams. In 250 milliliters of water, I think a cup is 240 milliliters. So basically 20 grams in a cup of water. And if you can get it to the small intestine, your stomach's not breaking it down too much, these are the results you got. So we got up to 5 nanograms per milliliter, okay? So it looks like introducing it this way got similar results or slightly better results than the 4 gram intravenous. So that means something was getting through, at least introduced this way. And what is this comparable to? If ideally we could get this into our small intestine, this would be very comparable to a single session of intense exercise. So weight training, the levels went from 0.85 to 4.19, give or take, right? So it actually was slightly better than a workout as far as raising growth hormone goes. These are the results of CJC 1295. So similar to a growth hormone releasing, peptide, is that correct? I can't remember which category this falls under. I was very interested in peptides 15 years ago, but not so much these days. It shows the different results, and the lower doses are actually just about where glycine would stimulate. Actually, the lower dose is actually about half as much as what glycine would stimulate. Glycine seemed to stimulate very similarly to the second from the lowest dose, okay? So, see, this is right about 5 at the peak, and then it sloughs off, and that's CJC 1295. With glycine, we actually had it peak more like an hour and a half in. As you can see here, 60 minutes, 120 minutes, it's still at its peak. Same here. 60 minutes actually peaks around, 90 to 120 minutes. So that's oral, quote unquote. The thing is with this, they didn't get the best response that they could possibly get when they didn't introduce it intraduodenally, but that doesn't mean they didn't get a response. We don't know what those numbers are in the normal subjects with a normal administration. So it might have been statistically insignificant, and it might have been just slightly under what they were aiming for. So I wish I had the rest of that information, but I do not. Let's answer why other amino acids that are touted as growth hormone stimulating amino acids, why they're not effective. And it's very, very simple. Growth hormone and insulin are not friends in your system. As soon as a big pulse of insulin is secreted from the pancreas, growth hormone pulsing shuts off. It's like a teeter-totter. One goes up, the other one goes down, right? So as we release more insulin, the growth hormone pulsing shuts off, okay? So, let's see, arginine, ornithine, and lysine are all touted to be growth hormone stimulating amino acids, but they also stimulate insulin release. So how's that going to work? Just use your head on that one, folks. So I suppose if you could find a way to suppress insulin response, and we'll get into that later, you might see some growth hormone results from that. But again, we'll get into that later when we get into the protocol, but that's as simple as it gets. Yeah, arginine, lysine, and ornithine can stimulate growth, yada, yada, yada. But that's the thing, is glycine does not. Glycine is the simplest form amino acid that there is, and it does not stimulate an insulin response. It's one of the amino acids that doesn't. So that's why it has greater potential. We've already got into how much does glycine raise GH. Bit more than a tough training session. About as much as a low to mid-range dose of CJC 1295. Not bad. Oh, got my buddy here. But again, it's dose dependent, so we don't know the upper limits of that. So in this study, they're using 18 to 20 grams orally. What if they use 25, 30, 50 grams? And now there's the question of, would that be tolerable? Would that make you crap yourself inside out? What's going to happen if you take that much? Well, just keep in mind, glycine itself in a neutral pH preparation is often used as a buffer for other drug preparations. So with that in mind, it's not too acidic or too base, too alkaline. So as long as you're preparing it in distilled water, you're looking at like a 6.5, 7.5 pH, so very tolerable. And with that in mind, it should be a good candidate for oral use without too much gastric upset. Have I done this at 50 grams? Not yet. We'll find out. But this is just a proposal, okay? So 2.2 pounds, a kilogram, $30. So very affordable. This is not a sponsor. This is just the best price I found. Bulk Supplements also has it. Bulksupplements.com also has it. Okay, so let's get into what my theoretical protocol would be, my ideal theoretical glycine growth hormone stimulating protocol. Number one, we're going to use the synergy between glycine, well, not the synergy, but you'll see what I'm saying. We're also going to use melatonin, or I'm going to be using melatonin. Now, I take 5 to 10 milligrams a night anyway. But at 5 to 10 milligrams, you're getting some growth hormone secretion from that above baseline. In fact, you're basically doubling your growth hormone, whereas with that big glycine infusion, you're, 4 or 5 timing your output over baseline. But this gives you a doubling over baseline. So we also know that growth hormone has more effect as far as IGF-1 properties and stimulation when used at night versus in the morning. I haven't brought it up, but it's really easy to find studies on that. It's basically just that when you take the same amount of growth hormone injection in the morning, or you take it at night, you get about double the effects of it at night, and the IGF-1 stimulation lasts much longer into the next day. So we're going to do this at night. So here's the actual protocol that I propose and that I'll be trying. Number one, 2 hours before bed, 12 to 25 grams of glycine in a cup of water, thereabouts, right? 2, 5 to 10 milligrams, I'll try 10 milligrams of melatonin 1 hour before bed. And then right before you go to sleep, another 12 to 25 grams of glycine in a cup of water. But what if here's the thing, you want to avoid insulin stimulation during this time. So if you're still snacking while you're doing this, forget it. That's going to nullify, I would think, any of the effects of growth hormone stimulation because you're pulsing insulin. So my suggestion for people that are gluttons like me and won't stop eating until they go to bed, if you're on a bulking phase or something like that, is just have the 10 milligrams or 5 milligrams of melatonin 1 hour before bed, and then also have a dose of, like, I'll use my quick cuts because what I have around, or you can use metformin if you have a prescription for that, or any kind of berberine that you find effective. Basically, we're going to squash our insulin secretion during this time and use an extraneous source of glucose management to make sure that we're not pulsing any insulin while we're trying to stimulate growth hormone. And then right before bed, have 25 plus grams, I might have 40 or 50 just to see what happens, in water right before you go to sleep. So after I'm done eating, while I've probably got some food in my system, but I'm using berberine or metformin or something along those lines to help manage, we won't have the presence of insulin there, or at least not as strongly, so we'll still be able to stimulate growth hormone without having that shut down. And that's about it, folks. That's what I found about this. Now, the big question remains, are there going to be as great of effects if we're introducing this a normal oral method versus intraduodenally? So I don't know, and I don't know how strong that effect's going to be, and I don't know how much my stomach's going to be able to stand. I haven't tried it yet. I've had no trouble with trimethylglycine, but that's actually used as a, kind of a upset stomach relief type of thing. So hopefully glycine will have some of the same digestion benefits as TMG, betaine, and hydrochloride. But I don't know. So we'll give this a try, and we'll see what happens. And if you're curious and want to experiment on your end, but here's what I've found so far.